At that prep school in 1978, I smoked marijuana for the first time, and then continued to smoke until spring of 1997. I quit in 1997, and am proud to say that I am still firmly in favor of its legalization for industrial, medicinal, and recreational uses. I was afraid for a time that my politics would change with that change in my lifestyle. For 2 months after I quit smoking pot, I had this recurring nightmare where I was hanging out with Charlton Heston and we were kind of getting along. I was particularly offended by the anti-educational propaganda-based Just Say No campaign. I had the much simpler motto, just say no your limits. This is the reason, by the way, that I quit. I found myself every afternoon sitting at home watching Sailor Moon, going, I think they shot this scene near my house. It was clearly time to quit. It bothers me that elements of American history have been expunged. I used to do a good deal about this in my act. I used to say in my act that, the way I see it, if I'm not wasted, the day is. And then I was told that Bill Maher, a political comic who some of you may be familiar with, was doing the same joke. So I approached him outside the Improv one night, and I said, Bill, I understand we're doing the same joke. And he said, what's the joke? And I told him. And he said, oh yeah, word for word, that's mine. And I said, well, why isn't it mine? And he said, well, how long have you been doing it? And I said, I started in 1984. And he said, 1983, it's mine. From which I learned a valuable Hollywood lesson, which I now pass on to all of you. Let the other guy bid first. Talking about this, I think, lost me some television jobs over the years. It certainly kept me out of some clubs during Reagan and Bush. I'll live with that. I think the truth is of greater value than anybody's individual career. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of brief history lesson. Up until the late 20s, hemp, the plant from which marijuana comes, was America's #1 cash crop. It made the sails that sailed our ships and the rope that was used to hoist those sails. Cannabis, the medicinal form, was the second most prescribed drug in America, following only what? Aspirin. Hashish, a very potent recreational form of the drug, was used by everyone from the middle class through the upper class. Unfortunately for hemp, in the late 20s, somebody found a way to strip the hemp plant and make paper. And this threatened William Randolph Hearst's lumber holdings. So he began to run stories in his newspapers saying that marijuana was very dangerous. No one had ever heard the word marijuana. It was sort of a dirty-sounding Mexican-ish kind of word. It made people nervous. He told America the truth. He told them that this horrible marijuana stuff was coming up from Mexico and causing Negroes to walk around smiling in public. People began to be uncomfortable with marijuana. He didn't really have the power to do anything about it, though, until somebody else came up with a way of refining hemp seed oil to create fuel and the equivalent of plastic. Now DuPont's crude oil holdings were threatened. And DuPont worked with Hearst to bring a bill to Congress through the House Ways and Means Committee, a group of stodgy old men that really should have been called the Wheeze and Moans Committee. And by taking this roundabout route, they avoided a great deal of publicity, so that by the time the Marijuana Tax Act came up to a vote, it had slipped past all the appropriate scrutiny. And on the day that it came up for a vote, the American Medical Association showed up and said, whoa, 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 you're talking about cannabis? You can't do this. And they were told they should have lodged these complaints much earlier. And the Agriculture Department said, well, you can't do this to hemp. We need hemp. It's important. And they were told they had waited too long to lodge these complaints. And the Marijuana Tax Act went into effect, putting a prohibitive tax on the growing of hemp and making it impossible for people to do so profitably. Over the years that followed, it was outlawed as a dangerous drug, and we wound up in the position we're in now. So in order to protect the two most damaging to our environment industries, it is illegal for me to watch Xeno Warrior Princess and smoke a doobie. which is unfortunate because it's the only way I can enjoy that show. It replenishes oxygen, it grows incredibly fast, it's a renewable resource. When you think about it, an entire nation full of hemp-burning cars sure could make it a lot less stressful to get caught in a traffic jam. Roll down the window, crank up the tunes. Here is something they will not have taught you in grade school. I feel it is important. George Washington wrote in his private journal, and I quote, "I prefer a pipe full of hemp to a glass of wine any day." We're talking about George, the father, the founder, the guy on our money. George talking about hemp, grass, weed, smoke, reefer, check it out, what you want. We're talking about George, the greatest American dreamer of all. George going, "Oh! This is great. We'll sneak across the river in the fog." You guys crouch down in the back of the boat. I gotta stand up here with the wind in my wig. This is hot. What was I just gonna say? Talking about George. George Washington getting desperate late at night, scraping the resin out of those wooden teeth, smoking it, getting headaches. It's important stuff. The founding fathers were hippies. That long hair was no accident. There's a reason our money is green. Do you understand my point? I love that piece. Recently I allowed a friend of mine in the comedy industry to read the script for this show, and she read it, and she said, "You know, Dylan, I know you haven't been on the road for a while, but this is kind of hack. There are a lot of comics out there talking about how George Washington smoked dope." On the one hand, it made me sort of sad. It's a good piece. I wrote it a long time ago. I adore it. It's funny. I hate to lose a good piece. I certainly hate to seem like a hack. On the other hand, it means that my efforts toward raising consciousness across the country may have had some little effect, at least in my fellow comics. But the most exciting thing about hearing this was realizing that up until about a month and a half ago, I was a schmuck. Because now, if one of these young comics comes up to me and says, "Hey, you know, we're both doing that same bit about George Washington," I'm going to say, "Really? How long you been doing it?"